Hey guys, today we are going to be solving quadratics by factoring. So what we're going to do is we are going to get an equation equal to 0. And when it's equal to 0, then we're going to factor it. And then we're going to use that zero product property that we learned in 10.1. And then we'll find our two values. So first of all, we want to make sure that the equation is equal to 0. And we always want to make sure that that value on x squared is positive. And x squared is positive here, so we're good. So we're going to replace that y with a 0 equals x squared plus 3x minus 10. So just like we factored in the last unit, we're going to look for our greatest common factor. I don't have a greatest common factor with x squared, negative 3x, and 10. So we're just going to go ahead and split the middle term here. So remember, to split the middle term, we're going to multiply our n's. 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. Our b value there is negative 3. So the numbers that are going to multiply to negative 10 and add to negative 3 are negative 5 and positive 2. So we have that 0 equals x squared. We're going to split up that negative 3x into negative 5x plus 2x. And we still have a minus 10 there at the end. So we'll look for the greatest common factor of those first two terms. That's x. We're left with x minus 5 on the inside. The greatest common factor of my second two terms is 2, and we're left with x minus 5 on the inside. So then we factor out what they have in common, that x minus 5. And we're left with the stuff outside, x plus 2. Now that we have two things that multiply together to equal 0, we're going to use the zero product property. So we'll set x minus 5 equal to 0 and x plus 2 equal to 0. When we solve those two equations, we're going to end up with x equals 5 and x equals negative 2. Okay, let's look at some examples. So over in this first one, we're going to look for our greatest common factor. Our greatest common factor of x squared and 8x is x. So I'll divide both of those terms by x to find out what's inside of the parentheses. X squared divided by x is x, and there's a minus sign. 8x divided by x is 8. So since we have plain old x's in there, we are all done factoring. So we have to use the zero product property now. So we'll set x equal to 0 and x minus 8 equal to 0. X equals 0 is already solved, so there's one of my answers. We'll add 8 to the other side of my other equation, and we'll get that x equals 8. Over on this next one, remember, we want our equation to be equal to 0. So that means we want to bring that 25 on over. We don't want to move the x squared over because then my x squared will be negative, and we always want our x squared to be positive. So we're going to subtract 25 from both sides. X squared minus 25 equals 0. So here we have a difference of squares. So my a term is where we take the square root of x squared, so that's x. My b term is when I take the square root of 25, so that's 5. So this will factor down into x plus 5, x minus 5 equals 0. And then we'll set each of those equal to 0. X plus 5 equals 0, x minus 5 equals 0. So then we'll solve each of those equations. We'll subtract 5 from both sides, and we'll get negative 5. We'll add 5 to both sides on the other equation and get that x equals positive 5. Okay. On this next one, we have 9x squared minus 64 equals 0. You might notice that 9x squared and 64 are both perfect squares. So this is a difference of squares. So to find our a term, we'll take the square root of 9x squared, which is 3x. For the b term, we'll take the square root of 64, which is 8. So this will factor down into 3x plus 8, 3x minus 8 equals 0. So now we're going to set each of these equal to 0. 3x plus 8 equals 0. 3x minus 8 equals 0. We'll subtract that, and 3x plus 8 equals 0. We'll subtract that 8, so 3x equals negative 8. Then we'll divide by 3 on both sides. So x equals negative 8/3. Leave it just like that. In 3x minus 8 equals 0, we'll add 8 to the other side. So 3x equals 8. And then we'll divide by 3 on both sides. And we'll get 8/3. Okay. With this next one, remember, we want our equation to be equal to 0. And we want our x squared to stay positive. So x squared has a positive 12 on it. We're not going to move him. So that means we're going to have to move 75 over from the other side. So we'll subtract 75 from both sides. And we'll get 12x squared minus 75. Now we'll figure out our greatest common factor of 12x and 75. My greatest common factor here is going to be 3. So I'll factor out a 3, and I'm left with 4x squared minus 25 on the inside of those parentheses. So I have two terms again. This is a difference of squares. So to find our a term, we'll take the square root of 4x squared, and we'll get 2x. To find our b term, we'll take the square root of 25 and get 5. So 4x squared minus 25 factors down into 2x plus 5, 2x minus 5, and we remember to bring down our greatest common factor with it. So now we set everything that has an x equal to 0. So 2x plus 5 equals 0, and 2x minus 5 equals 0. So with 2x plus 5 equals 0, we'll subtract 5 from both sides. And then we'll divide by 2, negative 5 halves. On the other one, x squared minus 5 equals 0, we'll add 5 to both sides. So 2x equals 5. Then we'll divide by 2 on both sides and get 5 halves. On this next one, we have x squared plus 12x plus 27. Do we have a greatest common factor with x squared plus 12x plus 27? No, we don't. So we're just going to have to go ahead and split the middle term. So we know we have a 1 in front of that x squared. We'll multiply our ends. 1 times 27 is 27, and my b value is 12. So the two numbers that will multiply to 27 and add to 12 are going to be 3 and 9. So we'll split that 12x into 3x plus 9x plus 27 equals 0. We'll take out the greatest common factor from our first two terms, that's x, and we're left with x plus 3 in the parentheses. We'll take out our greatest common factor of 9x and 27, that's 9, and we're left with x plus 3 in the parentheses. So then we'll factor out that x plus 3, and we're left with the stuff on the outside, x plus 9 equals 0. Now we'll set both of those equal to 0. So x plus 3 equals 0, x plus 9 equals 0. We'll subtract 3, so x equals negative 3. That's one of my answers. We'll subtract 9, so x equals negative 9. That's my other answer. Over here, remember, we want our equation to be equal to 0, and we want our a value to be positive. So we have x squared there. X squared there is already positive, so we are not moving him. We're keeping him right there. So to get this equal to 0, I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. So when I subtract 3x, I'm left with 0 over on that left side. X squared minus 3x minus 70. So now that we have this equal to 0, we'll go ahead and split our middle term. So we'll multiply our n's. 1 times negative 70 is negative 70. Our b value there in the middle is negative 3. So what multiplies to negative 70 and adds to negative 3? Negative 10 and positive 7. So if we factor this down, minus 10x plus 7x minus 70. The greatest common factor of my first two terms is x. I'm left with x minus 10 in the parentheses. The greatest common factor of 7x and 70 is 7, so I have plus 7. When we divide 7x minus 70 by 7, we get x minus 10. So then we factor out what they have in common, that x minus 10, and I'm left with the stuff on the outside, x plus 7. So then we'll set each of those equal to 0. X minus 10 equals 0. X plus 7 equals 0. So we will add 10 to both sides, and we'll get that x equals 10 for one of my answers. We'll subtract 7 from both sides, so we'll get that x equals negative 7 for my other answer. Do we have a greatest common factor with 3x squared plus 9x minus 12? Yeah, the greatest common factor there is going to be 3. So we'll divide each of those terms by 3 to find out what goes inside. 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared, plus 9x divided by 3 is 3x, minus 12 divided by 3 is 4. So go ahead and split our middle term, so we'll multiply our n's. 1 times negative 4 is negative 4, and my b value is 3. So what multiplies to negative 4, whoopsies, sorry about that. What multiplies to negative 4 and adds to 3, positive 4 and negative 1. So we'll split that 3x into 4x minus 1x. We'll take out the greatest common factor from x squared and 4x, that would be x. Then we're left with x plus 4 in the parentheses. To get x plus 4 in this set of parentheses, I'm going to have to divide negative x minus 4 by negative 1. So I'll have a negative 1 in between those two sets of parentheses. So we'll factor out what they have in common, that x plus 4. We're left with stuff on the outside, x minus 1, and we remembered to bring our greatest common factor with it. So now we're going to go ahead and set everything equal to 0. So x plus 4 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. So we'll subtract 4 from both sides. X equals negative 4. We'll add 1 to both sides. X equals positive 1. And those are my two answers. Over here we have negative 20x minus 60 equals negative 5x squared. So remember, we want this equation to be equal to 0, and we want our x squared term to be positive. Now, right now, he's negative, right? So if we add 5x squared to both sides, that's going to make this a term positive. And that also means this equation will be equal to 0. So now we're going to look for a greatest common factor of 5x squared, negative 20x, and negative 60. Our greatest common factor there is going to be 5. So when we divide, we're going to end up with x squared minus 4x minus 12. So now we'll focus on factoring just the inside. So we'll multiply our n's. 1 times negative 12 is negative 12. And my b value there in the middle is negative 4. So the two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 4 are negative 6 and positive 2. So we'll split that negative 4x into negative 6x plus 2x. We still have that minus 12 in the back and x squared in the front. And remember, we need to bring down our greatest common factor of 5. So then we'll look for the greatest common factor of x squared and 6x. That'll be x. When we divide both of these terms by x, we'll end up with x minus 6 inside of those parentheses. My greatest common factor of 2x and 12 is 2, so I'll put plus 2 since I'm factoring out positive 2. We'll divide by 2 on both of these terms to find out what goes inside of my parentheses, x minus 6. And we'll remember to bring down our greatest common factor with it. We'll take out what they have in common, that x minus 6. We're left with the stuff on the outside, x plus 2. And we still have that 5 down here at the end. Oops, I forgot my equals 0 on all of these. Equals 0, equals 0, equals 0. So now that I have things multiplying together to equal 0, I'm going to use that zero product property. X minus 6 equals 0. And x plus 2 equals 0. Over here we'll add 6 to both sides, so x equals 6. On this one, we'll subtract 2 from both sides, so x equals negative 2. Okay. On this next one, do we have a greatest common factor with 2x squared, 3x, and negative 5? No, so we're just going to have to split the middle term. So we'll multiply our ends. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10, and our b value in the middle is 3. What multiplies to negative 10 and adds to 3? 5 and negative 2. So we'll split up 3x into 5x, positive 5x, that's a plus, minus 2x. We still have that minus 5 in the back and 2x squared in the front. We'll look for the greatest common factor of 2x squared and 5x. That'll be x. So when we divide each of these terms by x, we get 2x plus 5 in our parentheses. To get our parentheses to match over here and get 2x plus 5, I have to divide negative 2 and negative 5 by negative 1. So I'll have a minus 1 there between those sets of parentheses. So we'll factor out what they have in common, 2x plus 5, and we're left with the stuff on the outside, x minus 1. Now that we have it factored and they multiply to equal 0, we'll set both of those equal to 0. 2x plus 5 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. That 2x plus 5 will subtract 5 on both sides. So 2x equals negative 5. And we'll divide by 2 on both sides. So that'll be negative 5 halves. With x minus 1 equals 0, we'll add 1 both sides. So x equals 1. All right. On this next one, we have 12x squared minus 45 equals 12x. Now remember, we want to get our equation equal to 0, and we want our x squared to be positive. So right now our x squared is already positive, so that means I'm going to move that 12x over to the other side. To move it over, I'm going to have to subtract 12x from both sides. So I have 12x squared minus 12x minus 45 equals 0. Do we have a greatest common factor with 12x squared, 12x, and 45? Yeah, 3 goes into all of those. So when we divide each of these terms by 3, we'll find out what goes inside of the parentheses. 12x squared divided by 3 is 4x squared minus 12x divided by 3 is 4x minus, and then 45 divided by 3 is 15 equals 0. So we'll multiply our ends. 4 times negative 15 is negative 60. Our b value there in the middle is negative 4. So what multiplies to negative 60 and adds to negative 4? Negative 10 and positive 6. So we'll split our middle term into negative 10x plus 6x. We still have that minus 15 in the back and 4x squared in the front. And we won't forget to bring down our greatest common factor. The greatest common factor of 4x squared and negative 10x is 2x. When we divide both of these by 2x, 4 divided by 2 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. Then there's a minus sign. 10 divided by 2 is 5, and the x's cancel out. The greatest common factor of 6x and 15 is going to be 3. So we'll put plus 3 right here. And we'll divide both of these terms by 3 to find out what goes in the parentheses. 6x divided by 3 is 2x. Then there's a minus sign. 15 divided by 3 is 5. All right. So we still have that equals 0 and bringing down our greatest common factor of 3 there. So then we're going to factor out what they have in common, that 2x minus 5. And we're left with the stuff on the outside, 2x plus 3. And we're going to bring down that 3 for our greatest common factor with us. And that's equal to 0. So now that we've got it all factored, we're going to use our zero product property. So we'll set everything with an x equal to 0. So we'll set 2x minus 5 equal to 0. And 2x plus 3 equals 0. With 2x minus 5 equals 0, we'll add 5 to both sides. So 2x equals 5. Then we'll divide both sides by 2. And we'll get 5 halves for x. With 2x plus 3 equals 0, we'll subtract 3 from both sides. So 2x equals negative 3. Then we'll divide by 2 on both sides and get negative 3 halves. All right, sounds good. See you guys later.